the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. In this video, I am going to walk you through step by step how to add the cuffs and do the seaming of your cocoon cardigan that we've been working on for the 2017 crochet along. At this point, I know many of you have completed the body of your cardigan and you are relieved to have those motifs completed. Trust me, I completely understand. It's really fun though. This next step is really the pièce de résistance when it comes to the cardigan, because it is what will set your cardigan apart from just a basic granny square cocoon, okay? We're gonna add some detailed cuffs and edging to the cardigan to really make it pop, make it a wow factor. Now, this edging is really great to do, and I am going to show you how to do it in a join as you go method. Now, what that means is as we are completing the cuff, we will at the same time be joining it to the body of your cocoon cardigan. It sounds a little bit complicated, and don't get all caught up in the fact that it's join as you go. What it really means to you is that you don't have as much seaming to do. You are going to add those cuffs to the actual piece, and you don't have to sew those into place. They're all going to join together. What I find fascinating about this particular technique is it can be used on just about anything. So you'll be able to take what you learned today by adding this ribbed cuffs to the body of the sweater, and maybe you decide later on you want to add something to another piece you're making. This is a great way you can do it. So there's a lot of learning things that are happening with this cardigan. By this point, you should have finished your body of the cardigan, as I mentioned. You also need the edging completed. If your edging is not complete, do not attempt to attach your cuffs yet. You want to make sure the edging is complete, because that will make the entire join as you go method a lot easier. Okay, now that you have your body completed, you have your extra yarn ready to go, all you need is the instructions, right? Well, you know where those can be found. In the video description right down there below, I'll put a link to the pattern over on the Marley Bird website. And while you're down there, go ahead and smash that like button, as my kids say. Seriously, they get such a kick out of it when I get to say that and you guys actually hit that like button. So thanks for doing that. Get your pattern, gather your materials, join me back here. Let's take a look at the sample and then we will dive right in. I am super excited to show you this next step of the cardigan. So let's take a look at the sample really quickly. As I take a look down here, you are actually looking at just a little portion of the right side of the finished sample. And this obviously already has a cuff attached to it. And I want you to get a glimpse of what this is going to look like. Now, this is the cardigan just folded in half. So this was made up with 6 motifs wide, okay? And what we will do is you will section off the center 9 inches of this short side of your cardigan. The reason you'll do that is because this is where you will place your actual cuff. What we will do is we will chain some stitches, work single crochets back, and when we come back, we will join with a slip stitch to the edging that you completed last week. The join with the slip stitch attaches that one row you did to the actual body. Then the next slip stitch we do will be the next stitch up. That actually takes the place of your chain 1 that you typically would do when you chain 1 and turn your work to work single crochets back. So what we will do here, let's follow along one more time. We will chain, we will single crochet all the way back, slip stitch into our edging, slip stitch into the next stitch of our edging, which takes the place of our chain 1. We will turn, and then we will work back along all of those single crochets. Then when we get to the next row, we will chain 1, come all the way back, and then we join with the slip stitch again to the next stitch, slip stitch to the next stitch to replace the chain 1, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? So by doing the slip stitches into our edging we completed last week, we are joining our cuff as we complete it to the body of the work. Each slip stitch would take the place of that chain 1 that you typically would do when you chain 1 and turn your work to work the single crochets back. So if you kind of think of it along that way, you can easily see where, oh, okay, so I need to make sure I do my slip stitch because that replaces my chain one, I turn, and I work back. Another thing I want to point out here is that on this finished sample, the actual cuffs were made with the wrong side facing to start. So when Caitlin did this, she had the wrong side of the body facing as she joined with her slip stitches. And one way to know that is because as we do these stitches back and forth, there's one row of double crochets that gets worked back towards the body. And that one row of double crochets, you can see the right side, view of those double crochets, and you can see that it's on the wrong side of her body. And the thing is, I want you to know that whether you choose to put those on the right side or the wrong side, whichever you choose, you just want to make sure that you're consistent with it and you do the same thing on the collar. That will make more sense as we go along, and I'm going to show you why now. Let's flip this back to where it's right side out so you can see something here. When this is right side out, so this is the right side as if you were going to be wearing this cardigan, you can see that if you were to wear these cuffs just flat out straight, they resemble where it looks like we're looking at the back side of those double crochets I just showed you, which is a really beautiful look. But what if you want to take your cuffs and you plan on folding them up like this, okay? Now we get this beautiful look of the right side of those double crochets, right? Which is just as beautiful. And it's simply beautiful. It's just simply beautiful. So if you decide, you know what, I know that I'm not going to wear my cuffs folded up, but I want this look on this side of the fabric, you will be joining with your slip stitches to the right side. If you want this look and you want, or let's say it this way, if you want this look and you don't plan on folding your cuffs up, you would want to join your slip stitches on the wrong side of the fabric. And when I say fabric, I mean the body of the piece. So here's like a close-up view of the difference. This is if the cuff was laid out straight, and you can see we're looking at the back sides of those double crochets. And this is with the cuff folded up, and we're looking at the front side of those double crochets. Both are equally beautiful, but it's important to make note which way you're going to do this, because when we move to the collar and we add our edging to the collar, you will want to make sure you do the same thing. Okay, I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to bring in my little swatch that I've been working along with you guys. And I want to show you what I did. So I decided that because on the original sample, the cuff was joined to the wrong side, I would join my example cuff to the right side so you could get a peek of what it looks like. Now, you know that I'm making a cardigan that is much, much, much smaller than any of the sizes just because it's a little sample that I'm showing you. So I equally made my cuffs a little bit shorter. They aren't as long as you typically would make them. But what I did here is when I did my slip stitches into my edging right here, I had the right side of my fabric facing me. And you can see that I'm looking at the right side or the fronts of those double crochets. And if I make this piece and I don't plan on folding those cuffs, that would be my look, and it's beautiful. But if I want to make this piece just like this and fold my cuffs, this isn't going to be the view I get. It will actually be this one, where I get the back side of those double crochets. I know this might seem a little bit confusing right now. It will make more sense as you start making your actual cuff and you start to see the fabric begin to create itself as you're making it. But I really think it's important that I point this out because I don't want you to finish one cuff one way, do the other cuff another way, and then they don't match. And then you have a collar that you don't know what to do. So I don't want you to have to redo work. So my point here is this. You'll notice in the pattern that I have you making your cardigan with the wrong side of the fabric facing you and slip stitching with the wrong side of the fabric facing you. If you're going to follow along with that, great. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. That's how the original samples were done. If you are changing it up though, and you're going to have it so that the right side is facing you, make sure you make note of that. Okay, that's the whole point of all this, is make sure you make note if you make any changes. Okay, so this is the beautiful cuff we're going to be creating, and let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you need to do when it comes to finding out where you need to place your cuff is look at the short edge of your fabric. So for me, my short edge only has 3 motifs wide. On this short edge, you want to measure out the center 9 inches of that short edge. On the schematic that you'll find on the pattern, you'll actually notice that on the left side of the schematic, the measurements are broken up into the portion that you would have from this corner to that point, and then 9 inches, and then from this point to this corner. So you can take a look at the schematic if you need a little bit more instruction. But if you take a look down here, you can see I've already used my markers to plot out where 9 inches lands as far as on this edge of my piece. Now, obviously, this piece is much smaller, so the 9 inches for this is very, very, very wide, and it would not be comparable for this size of a piece, which is why just a couple minutes ago, I showed you this bit, and for this one, I actually measured out 4.5 inches and made my little cuff over here with 4.5 inches, because I just thought it looked more proportionate. But for your piece, you will make sure that you measure out 9 inches, and then you want to make sure the wrong side of your fabric is facing you. If that's what you're going to do, remember I just said, whatever you decide to do, just make note of what you're going to do. So I will flip this around. I will have my wrong side of the fabric facing me, and I have my markers already in place. And you'll notice my marker is just marked right into the actual stitch of my edging. Okay, because that's where it's like my start and my stop, because from this marker to this marker, I am going to be placing a cuff. Now, these cuffs are very easy to make, where they are made up of single crochets and double crochets. And it's more rows of single crochets than you do double crochets. But as I mentioned before, we're also going to be joining it as you go. Now, for your particular size you're making, you'll notice that there is a different number of chains that you need to do depending on the size you're making. I will also point out that if you choose to adjust the size of your cuff, if you want it to be wider or shorter, you can absolutely do that without any problem. Again, just make note. Make sure that you put down, okay, on this one, instead of doing, I don't know, 25, I'm going to do 60 or whatever it is, okay? You just want to make sure that you know what that number is, okay? So let's do this. I am just going to pick an arbitrary number. I'm not going to follow along anything particular in the pattern. I'm going to chain 30, or I'm going to chain 13. I'm going to chain 13 just so that I can get through these stitches quickly with you on the camera. So just like before, I've put a slip stitch on my hook and I will chain 13. Of course, you will chain whatever number works for your cuff, but I'm going to do 13. Then I will do a single crochet in the second chain from hook. So I skip the one underneath my hook and go to the next one, and I will do a single crochet. Now I'm going to pause right here. I've put on the pattern on the Marley Bird website that it's really important you keep track of the number of stitches you have in your cuff. It is so easy to accidentally add 1 stitch or subtract 1 stitch. So I highly recommend either counting all your stitches as you work back and forth, and or add a stitch marker to the last stitch of your row, so that way you know that that's the last stitch when you come back on the next row. It is really helpful. Just trust me on this. It will solve so many problems of you having to rip out and redo because you accidentally increase or decrease a stitch. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to grab a marker, and I'm simply taking my marker and I'm placing it into the top of that finished single crochet I just did. And what that is going to do is let me know that that's the last stitch of my row, okay? So then what I continue on is with single crochets all the way down the chains I just created. So no matter how many chains you created, go ahead and do your single crochets all the way down. The total number of single crochets you should have completed will be 1 less the number of chains you did. So if I did 13 chains, I will have 12 single crochets by the end of this little section. Once I get to the end of this section, this is where the join as you go magic happens by joining this cuff to the body. And I'm telling you guys, once you start doing this, you're gonna be like, this is brilliant. All right, so I've got single crochets all the way down this chain number I've did, right? I'm gonna come over here. Remember, I have my wrong side facing because that's the way the pattern was written. And you, whichever one you want to do, I know I keep saying that, but I want to make sure that's clear. And I'm going to go to where my marked stitch is, because this is the first part of my 9 inches, right? And I am going to go through both of those loops of my edging, and I will do a slip stitch. So I went through both loops of that marked stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through the one that's on my hook. What I've just done is I've just attached this little single crochet row I did to the body of my fabric. Now, if this was another project, I would now chain 1 and turn, correct? But remember, I want to join my next row to the body of my fabric. So I am replacing that chain 1 with a slip stitch into the next stitch up on my edging. Let me show you. So I just joined to that stitch right there on my edging. And this is where I typically would chain 1 and turn. But instead of a chain 1, I will go to the next stitch up on my edging, insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then draw that loop through the loop on my hook. That slip stitch right there has now just taken the place of my chain 1. So I will turn my work. And it is totally okay that my yarn is wrapping around that side of my stitch. It's totally fine, perfectly normal. You'll see that it says to skip 2 slip stitches. Well, the slip stitches that we want to skip are the ones that we use to join, which makes sense. We don't want to accidentally increase our stitches. So we will skip the second slip stitch we did and the first one, and go into the back loop only. So working in the back loop only, that's what gives us this really beautiful ridging of the rib. We will work a single crochet. And we'll do that all the way down our row, okay? So back loop only, and I'm working single crochets. And I will know I'm to the end of my row because I have that stitch marker on my last stitch. I can also take the time and make sure that I'm only counting 12 stitches. Whichever way works best for you. I know that if I am counting all the time, inevitably my kids will stop and talk to me and start shouting out other numbers. So sometimes just marking a stitch is easier for me than counting. So I'm going to go to this last one. There is my last stitch. It's marked. I'm going into the back loop. I'm doing a single crochet, and now that second row is joined. This is where I would do my chain 1, and I turn my work, and once again working into the back loop only of all of those stitches, I will work single crochets all the way back. Remember to move up your marker if you're using the marker. After you do that first one, just take your marker and just move it up one. Okay? Just trust me on this, you guys. It will save you such heartache. Just trust me. All right, so I'm gonna single crochet all the way back in the back loop only, and I will end up with 12 single crochets. And I'm on my 12th stitch right here. All right, so I have finished that row, and it's time for me to join with the slip stitch. There's a couple things I have to remember here. One, I do not want to join with a slip stitch into one of the stitches that has already been used. So this stitch right here, right there, that is a slip stitch from the last time. So I don't want to use that. I want to make sure I go to the next stitch. So right here, this would be my chain 1 space. Remember, it was chain 1, single crochet, chain 1 when we did our edging. So I'm just going to go right into that whole space and work a slip stitch right there. So that would be the first one. So that joins that row to my edging. And now I need to slip stitch into the next stitch up, remember, because this takes the place of my chain 1. So I slip stitch into the next stitch up. That takes the place of my chain 1, and I turn my work. I want to make sure, once again, I am not working into those slip stitches. So I don't work into this slip stitch. I don't work into this slip stitch. I work into the next stitch, which is a single crochet, and I work into the back loop only, and I do single crochets all the way down. When I get into my row, my marked stitch is right there, making it really easy for me to see, and I work my single crochet. At this point, we will repeat the last 2 rows, okay? So we're gonna keep repeating this until you get a total of 3 single crochet ridges, and then we'll transfer over to a double crochet. So I'm gonna go ahead and chain 1, work my single crochets back, and join to the body once again. So let me show you how to do this. I will chain 1, turn my work, and again, working into the back loop only, I will work single crochets. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a really beautiful ribbed look for this cuff, and at the same time I am joining it to the body so I don't have to worry about any sort of extra seaming to join this cuff to the body. I'm to the end of my row. I want to make sure I join, but I don't want to join to one I've already joined to. I did a slip stitch into this one last time, so I'll go into the chain 1 space and I will do a slip stitch. And then remember to do a slip stitch in the next stitch up, takes the place of your chain 1, and turn. On this one, I will make sure I go all the way down with my single crochets in the back loop only. But on my next row, that's where things get really exciting because I get to change to 1 row of double crochet. Super exciting. That's what really floats my boat when I'm working on this ribbing. It seems to take a long time, you guys, but it really packs a punch, and it is simply beautiful. I am to the end here. I will do my single crochet in the back loop only. And you'll notice at this point, it's time for you to do row 7, which starts off with a chain 3. And that chain 3 counts as a stitch, meaning we want to make sure that we mark that 3rd chain of that chain 3, because that chain 3 is a double crochet, and that's really important. I will yarn over my hook, and I will make sure I don't go into this first double crochet because this chain 3 represents that one. And I'll go to the next one in the back loop only, and I will work a double crochet. And then do that all the way down the row. Now, some of you might be asking, Marley, why am I doing just this 1 random row of double crochet? Couldn't I just continue on just with single crochets? The answer is yes, you absolutely could just continue on with single crochets if you just want to keep doing that. You could do that the whole way. The reason I chose to do this 1 row of double crochets is I really kind of liked, I really liked the way it looks. It gives just a little added dimension, a little bit of a difference to a basic collar or a cuff. And I think it looks pretty. Plus, you know, it's one of the things that my friend Robin Chichula does. And it's just, you know, anything that Robin does, you can't go wrong with. She is fantastic. So I'm just going to make sure I have 12 stitches. So remember, this chain 3 counts as a double. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Perfect. I want to make sure I'm joining once again, so I do not join into the edge that's already been used. I go to the next one up, and I work a slip stitch, and then I work a slip stitch in the next one up, which takes the place of my chain 1, and I turn, and I'm back to the edging just like before, or not the edging, I'm back to the ribbing just like before, where I'm doing the single crochets in the back loop only. Now I'm going to get all the way to the end of this row so you can see how I would work into that chain 3, because I definitely want to work into those chain stitches. I don't like having a big gaping hole by working into the chain 3 space there. I like to work into the stitches. So here I am, I'm to my chain 3. There it is right there. And I can work either into just the back loop of this chain 3, or I can work through 2 loops. It's totally up to you. I'm just going to go into the back loop just like what we've been doing all along, work my single crochet, and you can see, I'll take this little stitch marker out so you can see a little easier, that this now has a really beautiful, nice, clean edge because that chain 3 counts as a stitch. Now I want to show the difference here because on this one, because this cuff was really meant to show you some differences and variations to this pattern, I did not count these initial chain 3s as stitches. I just counted them as a chain 3. And I want you to see how they really do just poke out. Okay, they really poke out of the fabric a lot. They don't blend in nearly as well as this finished one here. There's the chain 3 of this one, and see how nice and clean that is? So I wanted to show you the difference between the two so that way you can understand why it is I chose to make that chain 3 an actual stitch. Okay, so at this point you really should get the hang of what's going on because you're just doing single crochets and double crochets and you're joining them with a slip stitch to the edging that you already have created. Couple things to remember. Make sure you always have the same stitch count on your cuff, okay? You don't want to accidentally go one less or one more because it will show, I promise. The second thing is you want to make sure that when you join with the slip stitch to the body of your fabric, you are always joining with the slip stitch to a stitch of the edging that has not been worked into, and then remember to always do a stitch on the next stitch up to take the place of your chain 1. Once you have worked your cuff back and forth for the total of 9 inches, you will then finish off your cuff. So just finish it off and cut it and do the other side. You want to make sure that both cuffs are complete before you move on to the seaming. Pretty easy, right? Here is my no duh, Marley kind of statement here. Obviously, I am using different colored yarn for all these different sections to be able to show you easier on camera. But for you, you want to make sure you are still using the yarn that you chose to use for your garment, okay? So make sure you're still using that same yarn for these cuffs. Once you finish the cuffs, it's time to do the basic seaming of this piece. It's really starting to take shape, so let me show you how to do that part now. You're ready to seam your cardigan. Remember that your cuffs must be complete, and I'm also going to recommend that you weave in your ends that you might have loose right now. Go ahead and weave them in so they don't get in the way. Let's take a look down here and let's learn how to seam. You can see that we're going to use the example I've been using all along and the cuff that I've already completed for this portion that I've done. And the first thing I want you to do is have the right side facing up towards you with the short edge all over to the side, okay, with the cuff. Then what I will have you do is I will have you take it and I will have you fold it with the right sides touching each other. So the right sides are facing each other. Okay, what this has done now is it has folded the cuff in half and you've lined up the 2 edges that were on either side of the cuff when you measured out your 9 inches. So those 2 edges are lined up. The point of this is we want to seam this edge and this edge of the cuff, and we're going to do it by doing slip stitches. Now, one of the great things about doing that edging in week 3 around the entire body is that it gives us those stitches to be able to join our cuff as we go. But it also gives us stitches to seam our actual cardigan together. It makes it a lot easier for this joining purposes. If we were to begin over here at our cuff edge, we are joining up our foundation edge right here to our finished row that we completed. Now, as we were making these rows and we turned our work, we were continually making our stitches into the back loop of our cuff, okay? So with our fabric, the way it's viewing or way it's sitting and we're viewing it, the back loop is actually the one closest to us, because if we were to turn our work and work into those stitches, it would be in that, let me see if here, that loop there, which in turn, see how it's the front loop as it's facing this way? Hopefully that makes sense. So what I would do here is when you match these up, you will not only take one edge of your foundation chain, but I would also only take the loop closest to you. So I'm only going to have 2 loops that I will be working my slip stitch through. So let's try this. Let me grab my yarn. And obviously I'm through those 2 stitches. I yarn over, pull my yarn over through, and I'm going to join with a slip stitch to start. So I'm just going to chain 1, okay? So there's my chain 1 to start. Now when I go to the next one, I make sure I go only into the next foundation chain. I'm trying to make sure you guys can see this at the same time that I'm doing this. Okay, so I'm in the foundation chain, and then I only want to work into this front loop right there. So it's the front loop as it's facing me. And then yarn over, pull through, and then pull that through what's on my hook. Let's go to the next one. So I'm going to go into my foundation chain, go into the front loop over here, yarn over, pull through those, and then pull through the loop on my hook. I will continue this all the way down my cuff edge. And when I get to the body, I again have a decision to make. Do I want the ridge of my seam to show? Do I want it all to hide? These are decisions that you need to make, and whatever you decide to do will be beautiful. I mean, either whatever way you decide to do it is gorgeous. The trick here is that because we have 2 sides, we want to make sure they look alike. So what am I going to tell you to do? Make a note. Whichever way you decide to do it, whether it's through 1 loop, 2 loops, or whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you do it for both sides, okay? So here I am, I'm just slip stitching all the way down, and I'm just taking 1 stitch from the foundation edge. I'm taking the front loop as it faces me on the final row that I did for my cuff, and going all the way down. Let's see here. Make sure I get all of them because I don't want to get a hole. Here we are. All right, so I'm down. I finished my cuff. So my cuff is joined. And then if I were to flip this over, I want you to see what it looks like. It looks just beautiful. It looks really great, okay? Now I'm at the point where the cuff really meets the body of the fabric, and this is where I get to join up my edge stitches. So as I come down here to these edge stitches, I have a decision to make. Do I want to go through 2 loops on this one and 2 loops on this one so that I get 4 total? Okay, if I do that, that kind of leaves a look of sort of like a V-stitch in between the 2, which is really pretty. Let's do that for a couple so that we can see what it looks like. So I'm going through 2 loops on one and 2 loops on the other, and I'm just slip stitching all the way down, okay? And when I do that and I open it up, see how I don't get any sort of a ridge or anything there. If I decide that I want a ridge, I could go ahead and just do the 2 insides. So it would be the back loop of the one closest to me and the front loop of the one farther from me. And I could do that. Let's do that for a couple and see what the difference there is. Again, you can decide which way you want to join, because all this is going to do is just be a really beautiful finishing design feature for you. So if I do it that way, you get a look, again, it's nice and smooth, okay? And it makes it so it's just a little bit less bulky because I don't have all of those loops in there. So it's a little bit less bulky. You could also decide to just take the front loop of the one closest to you and the back loop of the one further away from you. And if I do that, let's see what this looks like. You know by now that what this will do is it leaves the loops that we're not working into on the right side of the fabric, which is really pretty and could be a design feature if that's what you want to go for. So let me do this. And as I flip this over, you see what I mean? Those are the loops that we didn't catch. So now they are on the right side of the fabric. So what we have here is, for this first section here, it's a little bit bulkier as my fingers are on the opposite side. It's a little bit bulkier right here, but it's still nice and smooth. These ones here, it's less bulky on the opposite side, but it's nice and smooth. And this one here makes it so that it's smooth in between these 2 ridges, but you have these 2 beautiful ridges, which could be a beautiful design feature. Again, you decide which way you want to do yours and do it that way. It's beautiful. I think it looks good any of these ways. When you get to the end of this particular row, let's just finish this up with the one I was doing so that way we can just take a peek at what it looks like. When you get to the end here, you would finish off your work and weave in your tails and then do the same thing on the opposite side. What's going on here is this little bit here that we're joining together will actually be the front part of your cardigan. So if I'm at the end, I'm just going to finish it off. Give it a nice pull, and let's take a peek at what it looks like. So if I put this right side out, there's my beautiful join at the cuff, and you can see it looks just like it does when all my other, because this was a double crochet joining up to the single, so it doesn't look like anything different. This portion here, obviously we have different joins going on, so we have a different look, but you can decide which one you prefer. Do you want it to look like it's nice and smooth, or do you want those ridges there to be a design feature of your piece? It's really up to you. This is really the littlest bit of detail for your cardigan, but I did want to point it out so that way you know what you're looking for. Once this would be complete, let me set this down here. If this one were all done also, you can see here that you have your cuff. This portion here is the front of your cardigan. And then if I hold these both in, here would be the opposite side, and this would need the cuff also. This should have the cuff already completed. And then this big portion right here, this is the opening for your body. So this portion here is what we will be adding your collar to, and it will help keep this entire piece on your shoulders a little bit more. By this point, after you've completed your seaming, you'll be able to try on your cardigan. Go ahead and put the cuffs all on, try it on. It's going to be too big. Just so you know, it is oversized, and the finishing portion around the body is not complete yet. That finishing portion is important because as of right now, the center section is too wide to actually stay on your shoulders. That's why I did the collar as wide as I did. You want to make sure that it's nice and wide so you have something to hang onto your shoulders. You also want to have the option to fold that collar back if you choose to, leave it straight if you choose to, whatever you want to do, okay? So at this point, you would be able to actually try on your cardigan and get super excited about it, okay? I think that's it, guys. So what I need you to do, I need you to finish both cuffs, weave in your ends, and then seam the sides together, and you will be ready for the next week of the cardigan, which is when we finish it up with the collar, and it's gonna be beautiful and stunning, and you're gonna love it, I promise. I'm having so much fun working through this with you guys. Thank you for taking the time to do this with me. I really hope you enjoy this piece, and remember, if you want to change the length, we're going to call them the length of your cuffs, you can absolutely do that. Remember that the gauge for this stitch pattern of the ribbing is 20 stitches equals 4 inches. So you can calculate out how long you want your cuffs to be if you want to make those alterations. But again, make note of that in case you do change it. You could do that for your other cuff also. Okay, guys, that's it for this week. Congratulations, smash that like button, and I will see you next week on Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns. And this is the Marley Bird Granny Square Cocoon Cardigan, the Crochet Along for 2017. Bye, guys. Learn on YouTube with Marley Bird. Visit youtube.com/Marley Bird.